Jack had always loved the woods. Growing up, he would spend hours hiking through the dense trees, escaping the noise and chaos of the city. But tonight felt different. The air was cooler than usual, and a strange stillness hung in the forest. The moon was full, casting long shadows as Jack walked deeper into the forest. The path was familiar, but something in the back of his mind told him that tonight was not like any other. As he moved farther, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him. Jack paused, listening to the rustling of the leaves, but there was no wind. It was too quiet. He glanced around, his eyes scanning the dark forest, but nothing seemed out of place. He told himself it was just his imagination, maybe too much coffee earlier that day. But deep inside, Jack couldn't ignore the strange feeling that was growing stronger with every step. Suddenly, he saw a faint light ahead. It wasn't like the usual flicker of fireflies or the glow of distant city lights. It was steady and bright, almost unnatural. Jack's heart began to race. He wasn't sure why, but he felt drawn to it. He cautiously approached the light, each step taking him further into the unknown. When he reached the clearing, the light was stronger, and standing at the center of it was a figure. It wasn't a human figure. Jack's breath caught in his throat. The person, or whatever it was tall, with smooth skin that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. Her hair, long and silver, cascaded around her shoulders like a waterfall of light. She wore a strange outfit, unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It shimmered as though it was made from some kind of material he couldn't even begin to understand. Jack stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The woman turned toward him, her eyes locking onto his. They were deep, like two pools of endless space, filled with mysteries Jack couldn't begin to comprehend. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she studied him as if she knew everything about him, as if he were not the one surprised by her presence, but the one who was being studied. A strange feeling washed over him. It wasn't fear, at least, not in the way he had expected. There was something about her presence that felt both comforting and unsettling. He wanted to ask her who she was, what she was doing in the forest, but no words came out. He opened his mouth, but nothing escaped. The woman stepped forward, and the air around Jack seemed to hum with energy. Without a word, she reached out a hand, and for a brief moment, Jack saw something flash in her eyes, something ancient, something powerful. But before he could process it, the woman vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the soft glow of the clearing. Jack stood in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was it a dream? Was he hallucinating? He didn't know, but one thing was clear. He had just encountered something beyond his understanding, something that would change everything he thought he knew about the world. The forest was quiet again, but Jack could still feel her presence lingering, like a whisper on the wind. The days after Jack's strange encounter with the woman in the forest passed slowly, but the memory lingered like a shadow in his mind. Every time he walked near the woods, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was as if her presence was still there, hiding just beyond the edge of his sight. Jack tried to push the thoughts aside, telling himself it was all in his head. But deep down, he knew something had changed. The next few days, Jack couldn't help but glance at the forest whenever he was outside. Each time, his heart would race a little faster, as if he were expecting to see her again. He tried to tell himself he was just being paranoid, but the feeling grew stronger. It wasn't just his imagination. He knew someone was there, following him. One evening, as he walked home from the store, the sky began to darken. The air was cooler than usual, and the trees ahead of him seemed to whisper in the wind. He paused for a moment, looking toward the familiar path that led to the forest. The last time he had been there, something impossible had happened. Could it happen again? He didn't know if he was ready to face whatever it was, but the urge to find out was stronger than his fear. That night, as he walked toward the edge of the woods, Jack heard it. A faint sound like a soft footstep behind him. His heart skipped a beat. He stopped, turning quickly to see if anyone was there, but the street was empty, and there was no sign of movement. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. It was probably just an animal, he thought. Yet the feeling remained. Someone, or something, was watching him. With every step he took toward the forest, the feeling intensified. Jack couldn't help but glance behind him every few seconds, half expecting to see the mysterious woman from the night of the encounter. The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent. He stepped into the trees, and once again, he felt it, a strange pull, like a force drawing him in. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the world around him seemed to grow quieter. Even the usual sounds of birds and animals seemed to fade away. It was as though the entire forest was holding its breath. Jack shivered. Then, as he reached the clearing where he had first seen her, the air suddenly felt charged. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and the same shimmering light from before appeared again, just ahead of him. It wasn't as bright as before, but it was unmistakable. The light flickered, and there, standing at the center of the clearing, was the woman. She looked at him, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light, and this time she spoke. "You've been looking for me," she said, her voice carrying a calm power. "But now you must understand what this is." Jack's breath caught in his throat. His heart raced. He had known something wasn't right, but hearing her words confirmed it. He wasn't imagining things. She was following him. And now she was ready to explain why. For a long moment, Jack stood frozen, unable to speak. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Why was she here? What did she want with him? And most importantly, what was she? Before he could ask, the woman stepped closer. Her presence was overpowering, but not in a way that made him want to run. It was as if her very being resonated with something deep inside of him. Something ancient, something important. Jack knew, without a doubt, that the truth was much bigger than he had ever imagined. The woman's presence was overwhelming, yet there was a calmness about her that kept Jack from running away. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he tried to steady his breath. His eyes never left her glowing form as she took a few slow steps toward him. The forest around them seemed to quiet even further, the wind holding its breath, the world waiting for what would come next. "You've been chosen," she said again, her voice like a soft, but powerful, echo that seemed to fill the entire clearing. Jack opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind was racing, trying to understand what she was saying. Chosen for what? She smiled, as though reading his thoughts, and continued, "I am Lyra, and I have come here to tell you your true purpose." Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. "You are not like the others. You are not just human." Jack blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean?" His voice was shaky, but he couldn't help himself. His entire world had just been turned upside down. Lyra's glowing eyes locked with his. "You have blood that is not of this world. Your ancestors came from a faraway place, a place where people like me, my kind, come from. Long ago, one of us lived on this planet, hidden from the world. He left behind something powerful, something only you can awaken." Jack took a step back, feeling a cold chill run down his spine. "Are you saying I'm not human?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Your DNA carries the legacy of my people. You are the descendant of a Valerian, my people. We are a race that has been watching over your planet for centuries, keeping it safe from those who would harm it." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "And now, Earth is facing a great danger, a threat unlike any your species has ever faced. The time has come for you to awaken the power that lies dormant inside you." Jack's mind spun. What danger? And why me? He had so many questions, his thoughts jumbled together, but Lyra's presence, her calmness, kept him from feeling completely lost. She seemed to understand everything in a way that was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. "The threat is an alien race," she continued. "They are coming to conquer this planet, to take what they want, and only the power that lies within you, Jack, can stop them. How can I stop them? I'm just a regular guy. I don't know anything about. Jack's words caught in his throat. How could he be the one to save the planet when he didn't even understand what was happening? Lyra stepped closer, her eyes softening. You have more power than you know. The artifact hidden deep in the forest. Your ancestors placed it here, waiting for someone with the right blood to awaken it. You are the one who can unlock its true potential. And with that power, you will have the strength to face what is coming. Jack swallowed hard, his heart racing again. He had always thought of himself as an ordinary person. He had never imagined being part of something so much bigger than himself. But as he looked into Lyra's eyes, something deep within him stirred, a feeling that he couldn't explain. You're not alone, she said gently. I will help you. But you must trust me, Jack. The time to act is now. For the first time in his life, Jack felt a strange sense of purpose rising within him. He didn't fully understand it, but he knew one thing for certain. Everything was about to change. And somehow, he was going to be the one to change it. Jack's mind was racing as he followed Lyra deeper into the forest. The night had grown even quieter, the only sounds now the soft crunch of their footsteps on the forest floor. The strange pull Jack had felt before was stronger now, guiding him like an invisible hand. He could sense the urgency in Lyra's movements, as if time was slipping away and every second counted. As they walked, the trees seemed to close in around them. Jack had walked these woods countless times, but tonight felt different. The path was unfamiliar, as if it had changed in some way. He had no idea where they were heading, but he trusted Lyra. There was something about her, an undeniable force of calm and certainty that made him feel like he was walking in the right direction, even if he didn't fully understand why. Finally, after what felt like hours, they arrived at a clearing unlike any Jack had ever seen before. In the center stood an enormous ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching up to the sky like twisted arms. The trunk was covered in strange markings, glowing faintly in the dim light of the moon. Jack couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. This place felt important. Lyra stopped in front of the tree, turning to face Jack. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing markings, and for the first time, Jack saw a hint of something deeper in her gaze. It was almost as if she was remembering something from the past, something that went beyond her centuries of existence. "This is it," she said softly, her voice reverberating in the stillness of the night. Jack looked around, confused. "What is this place?" "This is where the artifact lies," Lyra explained. "Hidden for centuries, waiting for the one who could awaken its power. And that one is you." Jack frowned. "But why me? I'm just a guy. Why would I have this kind of power?" Lyra gave him a knowing smile. "You may not understand it now, but your blood carries the legacy of a great warrior, someone who fought to protect both my people and your own. The artifact was placed here long ago, and now it's time for you to unlock its power." She stepped forward, placing her hand on the tree's trunk. The markings on the bark seemed to shimmer under her touch, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. For a moment, nothing happened. Jack waited, unsure of what he was supposed to do. Then, without warning, a soft rumble vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Jack looked down, startled, as a hidden stone door slowly emerged from the earth beneath the tree. It was massive, carved with the same strange symbols as the tree, and it seemed to glow with a faint golden light. "This is it," Lyra whispered. "The artifact is beyond this door." Jack's heart skipped a beat as the door creaked open, revealing a chamber inside. It was dark, but Jack could sense something powerful waiting in the shadows. Lyra stepped forward, gesturing for Jack to follow her. "You must be ready," she said. "The artifact will only reveal itself to those who are truly prepared. And you, Jack, are the one it has been waiting for." Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He had no idea what was ahead of him, but he knew one thing. There was no turning back now. Whatever lay inside this chamber, It would change everything. The fate of the world, and his, was now tied to the mysterious artifact. With a deep breath, Jack stepped into the darkness, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The path ahead was uncertain, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something monumental. The artifact, whatever it was, held the key to everything. And now, it was up to Jack to unlock its power. The air inside the chamber was thick with silence as Jack stepped further into the darkness. The only sound was the soft scrape of his shoes against the stone floor. Lyra walked ahead of him, her glowing presence the only light in the otherwise pitch-black room. Jack's heart raced with every step he took, his mind a whirlwind of questions. What was this artifact? How could it possibly help him stop an alien invasion? Lyra stopped in front of a large pedestal in the center of the chamber. Upon it rested a strange object, covered by a fine layer of dust. The object was cylindrical in shape, made of metal that gleamed faintly even in the dark. It was nothing like anything Jack had ever seen. Too smooth, too perfect. The markings on the artifact matched the symbols carved into the stone door and the tree outside. "This is the artifact," Lyra said, her voice steady but tinged with reverence. "It is a key to your power, Jack." Jack looked at the object, his breath catching in his throat. It looked harmless enough, but he felt a deep, almost magnetic pull toward it. He could sense its energy, a kind of hum in the air that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "How do I use it?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra turned to him, her eyes serious. "You don't use it, Jack. It will use you." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your bloodline carries the key to unlocking its power. Only when you accept your true nature will the artifact reveal its full potential." Jack frowned, still unsure. He wasn't sure he was ready to accept whatever this was. He was just a regular guy. How could he be the one to carry such a responsibility? But as he looked at Lyra, he saw the unwavering trust in her eyes. She believed in him, and for some reason, that gave him the courage he needed. "Do you trust me?" Lyra asked quietly, sensing his hesitation. Jack hesitated for a moment, the weight of the question pressing on him. But then he nodded. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he trusted Lyra. There was something about her that felt genuine, that made him believe she wasn't trying to deceive him. Lyra gave a small, approving nod. "Then it's time." She stepped back, and Jack slowly approached the pedestal. His heart pounded as he reached out and touched the artifact. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through his body, unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the world itself was charging through his veins, filling him with power, knowledge, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The markings on the artifact glowed brighter, and the symbols around the room seemed to come alive, shifting and changing before his eyes. Jack gasped, feeling his muscles tense, as if they were being stretched to their limit. His mind was flooded with images, alien worlds, battles between stars, and ancient wars fought by his ancestors. The power was immense, but it wasn't just in his body. It was in his mind, in his very soul. He could feel the weight of it, the weight of being chosen, the weight of the future of Earth. "Let it flow through you," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "This is your destiny. Embrace it." Jack closed his eyes, trying to focus on the overwhelming energy inside him. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, but when he finally opened his eyes, everything had changed. The chamber was brighter now, the artifact's glow fading as if it had been absorbed into him. He felt different, stronger, clearer, more alive. When he looked up, he saw Lyra watching him, a faint smile on her face. "You have awakened," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Now you are ready. But remember, the responsibility you carry is immense. The power you have now is both a gift and a burden. You must use it wisely." Jack nodded, his breath coming in slow, steady breaths. He could feel the power inside him. But he also felt a weight he hadn't expected. This wasn't just about fighting alien invaders anymore. This was about protecting the future of the world. His world. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked. Jack took a deep breath. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew one thing. He had no choice. The world was in danger, and now he was the only one who could stop it. "Yes," he said, his voice stronger than he expected. With that, Lyra smiled. "Then, let's begin." Jack had always thought of himself as an ordinary guy, someone who liked quiet nights, hiking in the woods, and simple pleasures. But now, as he stood in the dim light of the forest with Lyra beside him, that simple life felt like a distant memory. The power he had unlocked was still swirling inside him, a constant hum beneath his skin. He wasn't sure what to make of it. It felt like a part of him, but also like something he could never fully control. "You're ready for the next step," Lyra said, her voice steady, but filled with an undeniable intensity. Her eyes were sharp, focused, as though she was preparing for something big. Jack swallowed, trying to calm his racing heart. He had no idea what the next step would be, but he knew he had to face it. He couldn't afford to back down now. The fate of the world was in his hands, whether he liked it or not. Suddenly, the peaceful night air was shattered by a loud, echoing noise in the distance. Jack's head snapped up, and Lyra's expression darkened. "They're here," she muttered under her breath. "The invaders." Before Jack could ask what she meant, the sky above them seemed to twist and crack, a deep rumble shaking the ground beneath his feet. The trees around them began to sway as if something huge was approaching. In the distance, Jack could see strange lights flickering through the trees. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, too bright, too unnatural. "Stay close to me," Lyra ordered, her voice sharp. "It's time to put your power to the test." Jack felt a rush of adrenaline. He had no idea how to use the power inside him, but he knew that now was the time to learn. He followed Lyra as she moved quickly, her every step purposeful and sure. She led him deeper into the woods, where the ground sloped downward into a valley. The strange lights grew brighter, and Jack could now make out shapes moving in the distance, shapes that were definitely not human. "We have to stop them before they reach the city," Lyra said, her voice low. "These creatures are here to invade, and they won't stop until they get what they want." Jack nodded, trying to steady his breathing. He could feel the power building inside him, pulsing like a second heartbeat. He didn't fully understand it yet, but something deep within him told him that he was meant to face this challenge. He was meant to protect Earth, even if he wasn't sure how to do it. As they reached the edge of the valley, the invaders appeared, massive, metallic figures that moved with unnatural speed. Their bodies shimmered in the moonlight, their movements precise and fluid. They were not human, but they were not entirely alien either. They seemed like a strange blend of technology and organic matter, a race far beyond anything Jack could comprehend. Lyra stood tall beside him, her expression unwavering. "Remember what I taught you. Focus. Let the power inside you guide your actions." Jack took a deep breath, trying to center himself. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to tap into the energy that now coursed through him. At first, nothing happened, but then it was as if a switch flipped. He could feel the power surge within him, filling his body, his mind, his very soul. The world around him seemed to slow down, and he could see every movement of the invaders with perfect clarity. He raised his hands, and before he knew it, a wave of energy shot out from him, knocking the first invader off its feet. The force was like a shockwave, spreading through the air with a loud crack. Jack's eyes widened in shock as the creature stumbled back, its armor crackling with energy. Lyra's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Well done, Jack, but this is just the beginning. You have to keep going." The invaders regrouped quickly, charging toward them with terrifying speed. Jack didn't hesitate. With a fierce determination, he thrust his hands forward again, sending another wave of energy crashing into the oncoming attackers. This time, the blast seemed to split the air itself, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The invaders faltered, but they weren't done yet. They regrouped, their bodies shifting and adapting to the attack. Jack could see their movements becoming more strategic, more calculated. They were learning. And so was he. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the true weight of the battle ahead. This wasn't just about using power. It was about learning to control it, to understand it. And that would take time. Time that he wasn't sure they had. "Keep fighting," Lyra urged, her voice filled with urgency. "You can do this. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the future of Earth." Jack nodded, his focus sharpening. There was no turning back now. He had to keep going. He had to protect the world, no matter what. The battle with the invaders was unlike anything Jack had ever experienced. His body burned with energy as he unleashed wave after wave of power, each one stronger than the last. The creatures in front of him staggered and fell, but they kept coming. It was clear now that they were far more advanced than he could have ever imagined. They adapted quickly, learning how to counter his attacks, and Jack found himself struggling to keep up. Lyra was beside him, moving with a grace that seemed almost effortless as she fought alongside him. She was powerful, much more so than Jack, he realized. She seemed to understand the flow of the battle in a way he couldn't, but still, they were losing ground. The invaders were relentless, and every time they thought they had them cornered, the creatures would regroup and attack again, stronger and more organized. "We can't keep this up," Jack said, his voice strained. His body ached from the constant exertion, and he could feel the power within him beginning to wane. Lyra glanced at him, her expression fierce but calm. "Stay focused, Jack. You're doing well. But you must learn to control your power. It's not just about fighting. It's about strategy." Jack nodded, but his mind was racing. They couldn't keep pushing like this forever. He needed to know more about these invaders, about what they were truly capable of. And there was something else nagging at him, a sense that this battle was not the only threat they faced. There was something deeper, something darker lurking beneath the surface. Suddenly, a sharp, cold voice echoed through the battlefield, making Jack's blood run cold. "Enough." The invaders froze, their movements suddenly halting. Jack looked around, confused, as the sound of the voice seemed to come from nowhere. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, and for a moment, everything was still. Then from the shadows emerged a figure. Unlike the others, this being was not clad in the same alien armor. It wore a dark, flowing cloak that seemed to shimmer in the light, and its eyes glowed with a dangerous intensity. The figure stepped forward, its presence commanding and filled with an air of authority. Jack's stomach tightened. This wasn't just another invader. It was something far worse. He could feel the difference in the air, the weight of the creature's power pressing down on him. "Who are you?" Lyra demanded, stepping in front of Jack, her posture defensive. The figure tilted its head slightly, a smile playing at the corner of its lips. "Ah, the Protector. I've been waiting for this moment." Lyra's expression darkened. "You're part of the Shadow Council." The figure's smile grew. "Very astute, Lyra. Yes, I am one of them. But I am far more than just a simple member of the Council." The being's voice was smooth, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Jack's spine. "I have been working with these invaders from the very beginning. They are here because of me." Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. He had suspected there was something more to this situation, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. They weren't just fighting aliens. They were fighting the conspiracy, a betrayal from within Earth itself. "What do you want?" Lyra asked, her voice low and controlled, but Jack could hear the anger beneath it. The figure's eyes flashed with a cold, calculating gleam. "What do I want? I want the power of the Valerians, and I will stop at nothing to get it. Your precious Earth, your people, are just tools to an end. They are nothing compared to what I can achieve with the invaders' help." Jack's blood boiled. He had thought the invaders were the only threat, but now it was clear that this Shadow Council member was just as dangerous, if not more so. They had been betrayed by someone from within their own ranks, someone who had sold them out for power. "You won't win," Lyra said, her voice steady, but Jack could hear the urgency in it. "We'll stop you." The Shadow Council member's laugh was dark and hollow. "You're too late. The invasion has already begun, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Your power, your artifact, it's all useless now." Jack felt a surge of anger rise within him. He couldn't let this happen. Not to Earth. Not to the people he loved. He had to stop this, no matter what it took. "Then we'll see," Jack said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "I'll make sure your plan fails." The figure's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." As the beam disappeared into the shadows, Jack felt a cold determination settle in his chest. The battle had only just begun, and the true enemy was now revealed. It was no longer just about the alien invaders. It was about stopping the Shadow Council's betrayal and saving the world from destruction. He turned to Lyra, who was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "Let's finish this," Jack said, and together, they moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack's thoughts raced as he and Lyra made their way through the forest, the weight of the conversation with the Shadow Council member hanging heavily over them. He had known that there were dark forces at play, but he hadn't realized how deep the betrayal ran. Someone within Earth's own ranks had willingly allied with the invaders. Someone had chosen to sell out their planet for power. Jack glanced at Lyra, his mind still trying to process everything. She seemed calm, as always, but he could see the anger in her eyes. She had trusted the people of Earth, worked alongside them, believing that they were preparing for a future of peace, and now someone had turned against them. Someone who had once stood by her side. "What do we do now?" Jack asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Lyra's gaze hardened. "We find the source of this betrayal, and we stop it before it's too late." Jack nodded, but there was a knot in his stomach. The more he thought about it, the more questions piled up. How long had this betrayal been in the making? Who in Earth's leadership was working with the invaders? And perhaps most troubling of all, how had they been able to hide it for so long? They'd walked in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The forest around them felt different now, darker somehow, as though the trees themselves were closing in on them. Jack's thoughts kept drifting back to the figure they had encountered, the one who had revealed the truth. The Shadow Council member had spoken with such confidence, as though they knew they had already won. The invasion was already in motion, and nothing could stop it. As they reached the edge of the forest, Lyra stopped suddenly. She turned to Jack, her expression serious. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Jack raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes flicking to the side for a moment before she met his gaze. "There's something I haven't told you. About me. About my mission." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a deep breath. "When I first came to Earth, my purpose was not just to protect your people. I was sent here by my own race, the Valerians, to guide humanity. But there was more to it than that. My people have been watching Earth for centuries, preparing for this moment, for this war. And I was meant to ensure that Earth's fate was tied to the Valerians, that Earth would eventually join us, under our control." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "You mean you were using me? Using humanity?" Lyra nodded slowly, her expression somber. "I never wanted to deceive you, Jack, but I had to do what I was sent here to do. My loyalty was always to my people, but over time, I began to see something different in you, in humanity. I saw strength, resilience, and a willingness to fight for something greater than yourselves. I began to question the mission I was given." Jack stood still, trying to process the words. He had trusted Lyra. She had been his guide, his protector. But now, the truth was clear. She had been sent with an agenda. She had been part of the very system that had betrayed humanity. "You were going to let Earth fall under Valerian control?" Jack asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Lyra's face softened with regret. "No, I didn't want that. But I had no choice. My mission was set long before I even knew what Earth was capable of. I wasn't meant to care about you, Jack. But I do. And now I have to make a choice. I have to choose between my people and the future of Earth." Jack's mind swirled with confusion. He had trusted Lyra, and now it felt like everything was falling apart. "So, you're saying you've been lying to me this whole time?" Lyra's eyes darkened, but her voice was firm. "Not lying. Just hiding the truth. But the truth is clear now. There's no turning back." Jack took a deep breath. He had never expected this. He had always thought Lyra was on his side, on humanity's side. Now he wasn't so sure. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just about stopping the invaders anymore. This was about stopping the betrayal from within, about making sure that Earth would have a future, free from manipulation and control. Jack didn't know if he could trust Lyra anymore, but he knew that he couldn't do this alone. "Then we fight," Jack said, his voice steady with resolve. "We fight for Earth, no matter what." Lyra nodded, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "I knew you would say that." Together, they turned back toward the forest, ready to face the truth, the enemy, and the choices that lay ahead. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a faint orange glow over the horizon. The world felt eerily calm, as if the Earth itself was holding its breath. But Jack knew better. The war was coming. The final battle for the future of the planet was about to begin, and everything that had led up to this moment had been building toward this. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon with a quiet intensity. The betrayal of the Shadow Council still weighed heavily on Jack, but there was no time for regret now. He had made his choice. He was fighting for humanity. He was fighting to stop the invaders and the corrupt forces within the Earth's own leadership. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked, her voice steady but with a trace of uncertainty. She had shared so much with Jack, and yet she was still unsure whether the power he now wielded would be enough to stop what was coming. Jack nodded. "I have no choice. We have to end this." The ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, a subtle reminder that the invaders were closing in. The alien forces had arrived in full force, and they were not far from the city. Jack could feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. He had unlocked a power he barely understood, and now it was time to use it. But it was more than just raw strength. He had to be smart. He had to be strategic. "We can't just charge in blindly," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to disrupt their forces, take out their command structure first. If we can do that, we'll have a chance." Lyra's eyes softened. "You're learning quickly. That's the right approach." They moved quickly, weaving through the dense forest, avoiding detection. The alien forces were unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Their technology was advanced, their weapons powerful, but Jack knew that he had an advantage. The artifact, the power inside him, could give him the edge they needed to win. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about outsmarting them. As they neared the invaders' base, Jack felt the familiar hum of energy inside him, the power flowing through his veins. It was time to face the creatures head-on. But just as they reached the edge of the camp, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Jack." "Lyra." The voice was cold, calculating, and filled with authority. Jack turned quickly, his heart sinking as he saw the figure standing in front of him. The Shadow Council member, the one who had betrayed them. He stood tall, his dark cloak flowing in the wind, his eyes gleaming with a sense of superiority. "You're too late," the figure said, a smile creeping across his face. "The invasion is already underway. There's nothing you can do to stop it." Jack clenched his fists, his anger rising. "You're wrong. It's not too late. We'll stop you." The Shadow Council member chuckled, the sound hollow and cold. "You think you can defeat me? You think your power is enough to stop what's already in motion?" He stepped forward, his presence more overwhelming than ever. "You're not the only one with power, Jack. You've unlocked the artifact's strength, but you've only scratched the surface. I, on the other hand, have the full might of the invaders on my side." Lyra stepped forward, standing tall beside Jack. "You're wrong. We won't let you destroy Earth. No matter what you've planned, we will fight." The Shadow Council member's smile faded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of anger in his eyes. "You still don't understand, do you? Earth's fate was never yours to decide." With a sudden, swift motion, the Shadow Council member raised his hand, and the ground around them began to shift. Dark energy crackled in the air, swirling like a storm. The invaders' forces were closing in, and the final battle had begun. Jack could feel the energy surge within him, a raw, untamed force. He reached out, his hands glowing with the power of the artifact. A beam of light shot from his palms, striking the Shadow Council member and forcing him back. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the area, knocking the invaders off balance. But the Shadow Council member recovered quickly, his eyes flashing with fury. "You think that was enough?" he sneered. "This war is far from over." Jack's resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for Earth. He was fighting for the future, for everything that mattered. He wasn't going to let the invaders win, and he wasn't going to let the Shadow Council tear his world apart. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Jack felt a spark of hope. He had the power, he had the will, and with Lyra by his side, they could win. "We'll see about that," Jack said, his voice steady with newfound confidence. The final fight had begun, and Jack was ready. The sky above was dark with the chaos of the final battle. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jack and Lyra stood facing the Shadow Council member, the invaders closing in from every side. The ground beneath their feet shook with every step of the alien forces. But in that moment, something inside Jack clicked. He knew what he had to do. The power inside him, the power of the artifact, it wasn't just about fighting. It was about making the right choice at the right time. "Lyra," Jack said, his voice steady, "we can win this, but we have to end this now. We need to stop the leader of the invaders. He's the key." Lyra nodded, her expression determined. "You're right, but we need to stay focused. This isn't just about defeating the invaders. It's about stopping the Shadow Council's control." The Shadow Council member sneered, stepping forward with a sinister laugh. "You're both wasting your time. The invasion is unstoppable now. Even with your newfound power, you can't stop us." Jack's heart raced, but his mind was clear. He could feel the energy coursing through him, the artifact's power wrapping around him like a cloak. He had learned to control it, to use it as a tool, not just for destruction, but for protection, and he wasn't going to let this fight be in vain. With a quick movement, Jack raised his hand, focusing all his energy on the invading forces. A wave of light shot from his palm, sending ripples of energy through the air. The invaders staggered back, their once unstoppable advance slowed by the force of Jack's attack. The ground beneath them cracked and shifted, creating a barrier between the invaders and the city beyond. The Shadow Council member's eyes widened. "Impossible," he hissed, his voice filled with disbelief. Jack's expression hardened. "Nothing is impossible, not when you've made the choice to protect what's right." The alien leader charged, his form shimmering with dark energy. Jack braced himself, knowing that this was the moment that would decide everything. Lyra moved beside him, her own power glowing with strength and precision. Together, they were unstoppable. As the leader advanced, Jack focused all his energy into a single powerful strike. The beam of light that erupted from his hand was pure, raw power. It cut through the air like a blade, striking the Shadow Council member with a force that sent him flying backward. His body hit the ground with a loud crash, the dark energy around him dissipating. For a moment, everything was still. The invaders paused, unsure of what had just happened. The Shadow Council member lay motionless on the ground, his body no longer radiating the same dark power. Jack stepped forward, his heart pounding, but his mind clear. Lyra looked at him, a proud smile on her face. "You did it." Jack exhaled deeply, feeling the power inside him settle. "We did it. Earth is safe." As the remaining invaders turned and fled, retreating from the battle they could no longer win, Jack looked out over the field. The city in the distance was still standing. The world wasn't lost. It wasn't destroyed. It had a future, and that future was in their hands. Lyra stood beside him, her expression solemn but relieved. "The war is over, but there's still much to be done. The Shadow Council's influence will have to be erased, and humanity must decide its own future now." Jack nodded, "And we'll be here to help guide them." For the first time, Jack felt truly free. The weight of the world was still there, but it no longer felt impossible to carry. He had faced the unknown, the darkness, and had come out stronger. The future was uncertain, but now, he knew that humanity had the strength to decide its path. With Lyra at his side, Jack knew one thing for sure. Earth would never be the same again. And neither would he. A new dawn had begun, and it was one that would be built on strength, hope, and the power of choice.